At my son's wedding, I noticed something small, something almost invisible. My name tag didn't say mother of the groom. It said guest. Just that. Nothing more. No title. No place. No meaning. I stood there for a moment, holding that thin piece of cardstock between my fingers, feeling the weight of it pressed deeper than it should have. Around me, the ballroom shimmered with gold accents and soft candlelight. Crystal chandeliers reflected off polished marble floors. A string quartet played something gentle and expensive, something I had personally paid for. Everything looked perfect. Everything except that one word. Guest. I smiled. Then I pinned it to my dress. I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end, and let me know where you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Because what happened next, it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a revelation. I had always believed that a wedding was more than just a celebration. It was a moment where families stood together, where love wasn't just spoken in vows, but shown in the quiet ways people treated each other. That morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. Not because I had to, but because I wanted everything to be perfect. At 68, I no longer rushed through mornings. I moved slowly, deliberately. I made myself a cup of coffee in the quiet kitchen of the hotel suite I had booked and paid for my son and his bride. I remember standing by the window, watching the early sunlight spill over the city skyline, thinking about how proud I was. My son, Daniel, 38 years old, kind, hardworking. The boy who used to run into my arms after school was now standing at the altar, building a life of his own. And I had done everything I could to make this day worthy of him. The venue alone had cost over $30,000. The catering? Another $18,000. Flowers, music, photography, her dress, the rehearsal dinner. I stopped counting after a while. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about giving him a day he would never forget. A day where everything felt right. I chose my dress carefully. A soft champagne-colored gown. Elegant, but not attention-seeking. The kind of dress that said, I belong here. But I don't need to be the center of it. Daniel had once told me, years ago, Mom, you always look your best when you keep things simple. So I did. I styled my silver hair the way he liked. Wore the pearl earrings his father had given me on our 25th anniversary. A quiet reminder that even though his father wasn't there, I was carrying both of us into that room. When I arrived at the venue, everything was already in motion. Staff members rushed back and forth, adjusting table settings, checking floral arrangements, aligning chairs with military precision. I recognized many of them, because I had hired them. Good morning, Mrs. Carter, one of the coordinators said, offering a polite smile. I nodded back, warm but reserved. I didn't need recognition. I just needed everything to go smoothly. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Daniel stood at the altar, his posture straight, but his hands slightly tense, the way they always were when he was nervous. And then she walked in. Emily, my daughter-in-law. She looked radiant. I'll give her that. Her dress flowed behind her like something out of a magazine. Every detail was perfect. Every step carefully measured. For a moment, just a moment, I felt something close to peace. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe everything I'd felt over the past year, those subtle shifts, those quiet exclusions, those polite but distant smiles, maybe it had all been in my head. Maybe today would be different. Maybe today, I would feel like family again. The ceremony ended in applause. They kissed. Everyone stood. Cameras flashed. And just like that, it was time for the reception. That's when everything changed. The ballroom doors opened, revealing a space even more stunning than I remembered from the planning meetings. Round tables draped in ivory linens, gold-rimmed glassware, centerpieces of white roses and orchids, arranged exactly as I had requested. I made my way toward the check-in table, where guests were collecting their name tags and seating assignments. A young woman stood behind the table, flipping through neatly organized cards. Name, please, she asked with a practiced smile. Margaret Carter, I replied. She scanned the list, then pulled out a card and handed it to me. Here you go. I took it without thinking, but something in her expression lingered. A flicker, gone almost instantly. Still, I noticed. I always notice. I looked down, and that's when I saw it. Not mother of the groom. Not even family. Just guest. I felt my fingers tighten slightly around the card. Not enough for anyone to notice, but enough for me to understand something wasn't right. I glanced up. Excuse me, I said gently. I think there might be a mistake. The young woman leaned in, checking the card. Her smile faltered. Oh, this is what I was given, she said. I can double-check if you'd like. I paused. For a brief second, I considered it. Causing a scene. Asking questions. Forcing someone to explain. But then I thought about Daniel. About his day. About everything I had invested. Not just financially, but emotionally. So I smiled again. No, I said softly. It's fine. I pinned the tag to my dress and walked into the room. But as I stepped further inside, I began to notice something else. Something even colder than that single word. People weren't greeting me. Not the way they should have. Some smiled politely. Others nodded. A few avoided eye contact altogether. It was subtle, carefully done, but it was there. And after a lifetime of reading rooms, I knew exactly what it meant. I wasn't being honored. I wasn't even being acknowledged. I was being managed, placed, contained, and somewhere across the room, I saw her watching me. Emily, standing beside my son, smiling, but not at me. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't an accident. And whatever role I thought I had in this wedding, it wasn't the one they had planned for me. I walked deeper into the ballroom as if nothing had changed. As if that single word pinned to my chest meant nothing. Guest. The music was soft. Laughter floated through the air. Glasses clinked. Everything moved exactly the way a perfect wedding should. And yet, something felt off. I passed by a group of women near the bar. Well-dressed. Polished. The kind who noticed everything. Their conversation slowed as I approached. One of them glanced at my name tag, then quickly looked away. Beautiful event. Another one said, not to me, but just loud enough for me to hear. Yes, someone replied. Very generous. There was a pause after that word. Generous. I kept walking. I found my table near the back of the room. Table 14. Not close to the dance floor. Not near the head table. Not even near family. Just placed. I stood there for a moment, looking at the small printed card in the center. No family names. No familiar faces. Just strangers. I pulled out my chair and sat down slowly, smoothing my dress as if that could steady something inside me. Maybe this was just a mistake. Maybe the seating chart had been rushed. Maybe Emily didn't notice. I gave her that benefit. I really did. From where I sat, I had a clear view of the head table. Daniel was laughing at something someone said. Relaxed. Happy. He didn't look toward me. Not once. Emily sat beside him, radiant under the soft lights. Every time someone approached, she greeted them warmly, leaning in, smiling, playing her role perfectly. And then, I saw it. She leaned toward one of her bridesmaids, whispered something. The girl covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. Her eyes flicked toward me, just for a second. That was enough. I reached for the glass of water in front of me. My hand was steady. That surprised me. After everything I had just noticed, I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry. Not yet. I just sat there, quiet, watching, listening. And for the first time that day, I stopped telling myself it was a misunderstanding. Because deep down, I already knew. This was exactly how they wanted it. I didn't move from my seat. Not because I felt comfortable there, but because leaving too soon would have meant I didn't understand. And I needed to understand. A server approached my table with a tray of champagne. Would you like a glass? He asked politely. I nodded. Thank you. His eyes lingered on me for a second longer than necessary. Then he asked, quietly, Are you with the bride or the groom? It was a simple question. Harmless. Routine. But something about it settled heavily in the air. I looked at him, then down at the glass in my hand. I'm his mother, I said. The words came out calm, measured, but they didn't land the way they should have. His expression shifted, just slightly. Oh, I'm sorry, he said. Sorry. Not, of course. Not, it's an honor. Sorry. He walked away quickly after that. And I sat there, replaying that moment in my head. Not his question, but his reaction. Because people like him, they read situations fast. They know who matters in a room. And more importantly, they know who doesn't. I looked back toward the head table. This time, I didn't look at Daniel. I looked at Emily. Really looked. The way I should have months ago. She was in control of everything. The way guests approached her first. The way conversations seemed to orbit around her. The way even Daniel leaned slightly in her direction, as if adjusting to her rhythm. And then, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A clipboard, resting just beside her chair. The wedding coordinator leaned in, whispered something, and Emily nodded, without hesitation. Decisive, confident, prepared. This wasn't just her wedding. This was her design, her structure, her decisions. And suddenly, everything began to make sense. The distance over the past year, the subtle changes, the way plans were made without me, the way I was informed not included. This didn't start today. Today was just the first time she stopped hiding it. I took a slow sip of champagne, let it settle. Then I reached for my purse, resting quietly beside my chair. I opened it, not in a rush, not in anger, just carefully, like someone who had finally found the piece that completed the picture. Inside, my phone lit up as I touched it. Several unread messages, vendors, confirmations, final payments, everything tied to today, everything tied to me. I closed my purse again, gently, and placed my hands on the table. Still, composed, because now, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't guessing. I wasn't hoping. I knew exactly what this was. And more importantly, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. I didn't reach for my phone right away. Not yet. Because once I did, there would be no going back. So instead, I sat there and let my mind drift somewhere quieter. Somewhere before all of this. I remembered the first time Daniel told me about Emily. We were in my kitchen, a Sunday afternoon. Nothing special. He was standing by the counter, pretending to help me slice apples, but mostly just talking. "There's someone I want you to meet," he said. I looked at him, smiled. I was wondering when that would happen. He laughed, a little nervous, a little hopeful. That was always Daniel. Open-hearted, trusting. When I met her, she was different than I expected. Soft-spoken, polite, careful with her words. She called me Mrs. Carter at first, then quickly changed it to Mom. I remember that moment clearly. It felt warm, natural, like she was choosing to step into the family, not just marry into it. She used to ask for my advice. About recipes. About hosting. Even about Daniel. What does he like for breakfast? Does he get stressed easily? What makes him feel better after a long day? Small questions, but thoughtful ones. The kind that made me believe she cared. When they got engaged, she hugged me tightly. "I couldn't have done this without you," she said. I didn't question it. Why would I? The planning started soon after. Venues, menus, guest lists. At first, she included me in everything. We sat together with planners, tasted dishes side by side, compared fabric samples under different lighting. She would turn to me and say, "What do you think, Mom?" And I would answer, carefully, respectfully, proud to be part of it. But somewhere along the way, that changed. The meetings became fewer. Then, they stopped including me altogether. Decisions were already made by the time I heard about them. "Oh, we finalized the venue last week. We picked the menu already. The guest list is set," always said gently, always with a smile. I told myself it was normal. Young couples want control over their wedding. I didn't want to interfere, so I stepped back, quietly. But one thing never changed. The payments. Those still came to me. Every invoice, every deposit, every final confirmation, always sent directly to my email. Always with a polite note attached. "Thank you so much for your support." Support. That was the word she used. Not family, not partnership, just support. I see it clearly now. Back then, I didn't. Or maybe, I chose not to. I blinked slowly and returned to the present. The music, the laughter, the room I had paid for, and the seat they had given me. Table 14. Guest. I let out a quiet breath. Not heavy, not broken, just steady. Because the truth wasn't new. It had been building for months. Piece by piece. Smile by smile. Decision by decision. Today was simply the day it finally showed itself. I didn't go back to the head table. I stayed exactly where they had placed me. Table 14. The first course was being served. Plates moved quickly across the room. Servers in black uniforms, trained to be invisible, gliding between conversations and laughter. When they reached my table, there was a slight hesitation. Just a second. Then one of them leaned toward another and whispered something. Too soft to hear, but I saw the glance. Again, I folded my napkin slowly onto my lap, picked up my fork, took a bite. The food was excellent. Of course it was. I had approved every single item on that menu. "Is this seat taken?" The voice came from my left. I turned. A woman, mid-50s, elegant, unfamiliar, stood beside the empty chair. "No," I said. "Please." She sat down, adjusting her dress, offering a polite smile. "I don't think we've met. I'm Claire. I'm a friend of Emily's family." I nodded. "Margaret." She glanced at my name tag. "Nice to meet you." There was a pause. Then she added, lightly, "So, how do you know the couple?" The question landed gently, but it didn't feel gentle. I looked at her, studied her expression. There was no malice there, just curiosity, the kind people have when something doesn't quite add up. "I'm Daniel's mother," I said. Claire blinked. Just once. Then she smiled again, quickly, almost too quickly. "Oh, of course," she said. But her eyes shifted, toward the head table, then back to me. "I just thought," she began, then stopped herself. "Never mind." "No," I said calmly. "Go ahead." She hesitated, lowered her voice. "I heard Emily mention earlier that Daniel's mother couldn't attend." Silence. I didn't react. Not outwardly. But something inside me settled into place. "Did she?" I asked. Claire nodded, a little uncomfortable now. "Yes," she said. "It was complicated." Complicated. I let that word sit between us, rolled it over in my mind, measured it. Then I gave a small smile. "I see." Claire seemed unsure of what to say next. She reached for her glass, took a sip, and looked away. The conversation ended there, but it didn't need to continue, because I had heard enough. This wasn't just distance. It wasn't just exclusion. It was replacement. In their version of this day, I wasn't misunderstood. I wasn't misplaced. I wasn't supposed to exist at all. I placed my fork down carefully, wiped my hands with my napkin, every movement slow, controlled. Then I reached for my purse again, opened it, took out my phone. This time, I didn't hesitate, because now, there was nothing left to question. I unlocked my phone. The screen lit up softly in my hand, as if nothing unusual was happening. Around me, the room continued exactly as before. Laughter, music, silverware against porcelain. A perfect evening. I opened my email. At the top of my inbox, the confirmations were still there. Venue, catering, music, floral. Every detail of this wedding tied to my name, my accounts, my authorization. For a moment, I simply looked at them, not with anger, not even with disappointment, just clarity. Then I tapped on the first one. Venue, final balance paid. A message thread opened. Polite, professional, efficient. Please confirm all final arrangements. Looking forward to hosting your family. Thank you again, Mrs. Carter. I pressed reply. My fingers moved slowly across the screen. No shaking, no hesitation. "Hello, this is Margaret Carter. I need to make an immediate adjustment to today's payment authorization." I paused, read it once, then continued. "Please suspend all active services tied to my account until further notice. I will follow up shortly." I didn't explain. I didn't justify. I didn't ask. I sent it. The message disappeared into the thread as quietly as it had been written. No sound, no signal. No one around me noticed. I moved to the next email. Catering, event service confirmation opened. Replied. Please pause service under my authorization. Further instructions to follow. Sent. Then the next. Live band contract. Please hold performance until payment status is confirmed. Sent. One by one. Carefully. Deliberately. Each message was simple. Clean. Final. I wasn't making a scene. I wasn't raising my voice. I wasn't even standing up. But something had already begun. Something quiet. Something irreversible. I placed my phone back into my purse. Closed it gently. Across the room, Emily laughed at something one of her guests said. Daniel stood beside her, relaxed, unaware. The lights still shimmered. The music still played. The servers still moved between tables. Everything looked the same. But it wasn't. Because now, every detail they were enjoying, every moment they thought was secured, was standing on something they had just taken for granted. And I had just removed my hands from it. At first, nothing happened. The music continued. Soft, elegant, controlled. Glasses still clinked. Conversations still flowed. From the outside, it was still a perfect wedding. But then, something small shifted. A server approached the head table, leaned down, and whispered to the coordinator. The coordinator frowned slightly, just for a second. Then she nodded and walked quickly toward the side of the room, pulling out her phone. I watched. Not obviously, just enough. At my table, Claire glanced around. Is it me? She said quietly. Or does something feel off? I didn't answer. I simply lifted my glass and took a small sip. Across the room, the band began transitioning between songs. But instead of starting the next one, they paused. A brief silence filled the space. Not long, just enough for people to notice. A few guests looked toward the stage. One of the musicians adjusted something, exchanged a look with another. Then the music resumed. Slightly delayed. Slightly uncertain. Small things. Easy to ignore. If you weren't paying attention. But I was. Near the entrance, I saw the catering manager speaking with two servers. Their movement slowed. One of them looked toward the kitchen doors, then back at the manager. A quiet exchange. Tension, carefully hidden under professionalism. Plates that should have been cleared stayed on tables a little longer. Drinks weren't refilled as quickly. The rhythm of the room, once smooth, seamless, was beginning to stutter. Still, most guests didn't notice. They were laughing, talking, focused on themselves, on the couple, on the illusion. At the head table, Emily leaned toward the coordinator again. This time, her smile didn't reach her eyes. Her posture shifted. Tighter, controlled, but alert. Daniel said something to her. She nodded quickly, too quickly, and for the first time that evening, she looked around the room, not as a bride enjoying her wedding, but as someone trying to understand why things were no longer going according to plan. Our eyes met. Just for a second. I didn't look away. I didn't smile. I didn't react. I simply held her gaze. Calm. Still. And in that brief moment, I saw it. The flicker. Not fear. Not yet. But confusion. Because something had changed. And she could feel it. She just didn't know that it had started with me. The shift didn't happen all at once. It unfolded piece by piece. The music was the first to break. The band finished a song, something soft, forgettable, and instead of flowing into the next one, they stopped. Completely. A few guests clapped politely, expecting the transition. But nothing followed. No next note. No background melody. Just silence. It stretched longer than it should have. 5 seconds. 10. 15. People began to notice. Heads turned toward the stage. One of the musicians stepped back from the microphone, speaking quietly to someone off to the side. Another checked his phone. Then the lights flickered. Not dramatically, just a subtle dip. Enough to make people look up. At the head table, Emily's smile tightened. She leaned sharply toward the wedding coordinator. What's going on? I saw her mouth the words. The coordinator shook her head slightly. Uncertain. Already moving. Near the kitchen doors, the catering staff had stopped mid-motion. A line of servers stood still, trays in hand. One of them turned around. Another set her tray down, carefully, like she wasn't sure what she was allowed to do next. The rhythm was gone now. Completely. Claire shifted in her seat beside me. This isn't normal, she whispered. No, it wasn't. I folded my hands neatly on the table. Watched. A man in a dark suit, venue management, walked quickly across the room, heading straight toward the head table. His expression was professional, but tight. He leaned down beside Emily, spoke quietly. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. Her face changed. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle. The smile faded first. Then her eyes sharpened. Searching. Calculating. What do you mean? She asked, this time loud enough for those closest to hear. The man straightened slightly. Still composed. Still controlled. But firmer now. There's been an issue with the payment authorization, he said. We've been instructed to pause all active services tied to this event. Pause. That word moved through the room faster than any announcement. Guests began to murmur. Low at first, then building. Emily stood up. Too quickly. Her chair scraped against the floor, breaking whatever illusion of elegance was left. That's not possible, she said. There must be a mistake. The man didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He simply replied, we received direct instruction from the account holder. Account holder. For a moment, everything stilled again. Because now, the problem wasn't confusion. It wasn't timing. It was authority. Emily's eyes moved across the room. Fast. Focused. Looking for someone. Looking for the person who could do this. And then, she found me. At table 14. Sitting exactly where she had placed me. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just met her gaze. Calm. Unshaken. And this time, the flicker in her eyes wasn't confusion anymore. It was recognition. She didn't come to me right away. Not at first. Emily turned to Daniel. Fast. Controlled. Urgent. She said something to him. Too low for the room, but not low enough to hide the tension. Daniel frowned. Looked confused. Then he followed her gaze. Across the room. To me. I saw the moment it hit him. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. He stepped away from the head table. Slow at first. Then faster. Emily followed right behind him. her heels sharp against the floor. Precise. Intentional. The room parted slightly. As they moved, guests stepping back, conversations lowering, not silent, but quieter. Watching, they stopped at my table. For a second, no one spoke. Daniel looked at me the way he used to when he was a child and didn't understand something, searching my face for an answer. "Mom," he said. Just that. I looked up at him. Calm. Still. "Yes." He hesitated, glanced back at Emily, then back at me. "There's an issue with the payments," he said. "They're saying everything's been paused." I nodded once. "I know." That was all. The words settled between us. Heavy. Final. Emily stepped forward, not waiting anymore. "What did you do?" she asked. Her voice was controlled, but barely. I turned my eyes to her. Slowly. "I followed your instruction," I said. Her brows pulled together. "I didn't give you any instruction." I held her gaze. "Steady." "You told me to leave," I said. Silence. Not loud, not dramatic, but sharp enough to cut through everything else. Daniel looked at her, then back at me. "Mom, that's not," he started. I raised my hand slightly, not to stop him, just enough to pause the moment. "You said I wasn't welcome here," I continued. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. So I removed what was mine. Emily let out a short breath, half disbelief, half anger. "You're ruining this wedding," she said. I tilted my head slightly. "Considered that?" "No," I replied quietly. "I'm stepping out of it." Another silence. Longer this time. Because now, they understood. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't something that could be fixed with a quick apology or a call behind the scenes. This was a decision, and it had already been made. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his composure slipping. "Mom, please," he said. "We can fix this. Just call them. Tell them to continue." I looked at him, really looked at him. The boy I raised. The man standing in front of me. The distance between those two versions, clearer than ever. "I already did," I said. He blinked. Relief flickered for a second. "Good. Then let's just," I told them to stop. The relief disappeared. And for the first time that night, there was no confusion left in his eyes. Only realization. She didn't come to me right away. Not at first. Emily turned to Daniel. Fast. Controlled. Urgent. She said something to him. Too low for the room, but not low enough to hide the tension. Daniel frowned. Looked confused. Then he followed her gaze. Across the room. To me. I saw the moment it hit him. Not fully. Not clearly. But enough. He stepped away from the head table. Slow at first. Then faster. Emily followed right behind him. Her heels sharp against the floor. Precise. Intentional. The room parted slightly as they moved. Guests stepping back. Conversations lowering. Not silent, but quieter. Watching. They stopped at my table. For a second, no one spoke. Daniel looked at me the way he used to when he was a child and didn't understand something, searching my face for an answer. "Mom," he said. Just that. I looked up at him. Calm. Still. "Yes." He hesitated, glanced back at Emily, then back at me. "There's an issue with the payments," he said. "They're saying everything's been paused." I nodded once. "I know." That was all. The words settled between us. Heavy. Final. Emily stepped forward, not waiting anymore. "What did you do?" she asked. Her voice was controlled, but barely. I turned my eyes to her. Slowly. "I followed your instruction," I said. Her brows pulled together. "I didn't give you any instruction." I held her gaze. "Steady." "You told me to leave," I said. Silence. Not loud, not dramatic, but sharp enough to cut through everything else. Daniel looked at her, then back at me. "Mom, that's not," he started. I raised my hand slightly, not to stop him, just enough to pause the moment. "You said I wasn't welcome here," I continued. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. So I removed what was mine. Emily let out a short breath, half disbelief, half anger. "You're ruining this wedding," she said. I tilted my head slightly. Considered that? "No," I replied quietly. "I'm stepping out of it." Another silence. Longer this time. Because now, they understood. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't something that could be fixed with a quick apology or a call behind the scenes. This was a decision, and it had already been made. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, his composure slipping. "Mom, please," he said. "We can fix this. Just call them. Tell them to continue." I looked at him, really looked at him. The boy I raised. The man standing in front of me. The distance between those two versions, clearer than ever. I already did, I said. He blinked. Relief flickered for a second. Good. Then let's just, I told them to stop. The relief disappeared. And for the first time that night, there was no confusion left in his eyes. Only realization. For a moment, no one moved. Not Daniel. Not Emily. Not even the guests standing close enough to hear. It was as if the entire room had paused, waiting for something to undo what I had just said. But nothing came. Emily was the first to react. Of course she was. This is insane, she said, her voice no longer controlled. You can't just stop a wedding in the middle of it. I looked at her. Calm. I didn't stop it, I replied. I stepped out of it. Her jaw tightened. That's the same thing. I shook my head slightly. No, I said. It only feels that way because you built it on something that wasn't yours. That landed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But deep enough that she didn't answer right away. Around us, the room had fully shifted now. Guests were no longer pretending not to notice. Conversations had broken into whispers. Phones were coming out. People watching, quietly, carefully. At the head table, half-empty glasses sat untouched. The band stood still. The servers waited for direction that wasn't coming. Everything that had once moved seamlessly had stopped. Daniel stepped closer to me, lowered his voice. Mom, please, he said again. You're making a scene. I met his eyes. Steady. No, I said softly. I'm ending one. He flinched, just slightly, because he understood what I meant. This didn't start 5 minutes ago. It started long before today. Emily let out a sharp breath. Then she stepped forward again, closer this time. Too close. You're being petty, she said. I didn't respond immediately. I let the word sit there. Measured it. Then I asked, am I? She crossed her arms. This is our day, she said. You don't get to control it just because you paid for it. I nodded once. That's true, I said. For a second, she looked almost victorious. Then I continued. But I do get to decide where my support ends. Her expression shifted. Because now, the argument wasn't emotional anymore. It was factual. Daniel exhaled heavily, ran both hands through his hair, trying to hold on to something that was already slipping. Okay, he said quickly. Fine. We'll fix this. We'll pay them ourselves. I didn't interrupt. I let him say it. Emily turned to him, nodded fast. Yes, we'll just cover it. Tell them to keep going. They both looked at me, waiting. I held their gaze for a moment. Then I said, go ahead. Another pause. Not the kind filled with hope. The kind filled with realization. Because they both knew. Even if they wanted to fix it. Even if they tried to take control back. It wouldn't be immediate. It wouldn't be smooth. It wouldn't be invisible. The damage had already been done. The illusion was gone. And in its place was the truth. A wedding that looked perfect until the person holding it together let go. Daniel turned away from me first. Not in anger. Not even in frustration. In panic. He pulled out his phone immediately, stepping a few feet aside. I'll call them, he said quickly. We'll sort this out. Emily followed him, already dialing someone else. Her voice sharp now. No softness left. Yes, this is Emily Carter. There's been a mistake. No, I need you to resume services immediately, she stopped. Listening. Her expression changed again. Not anger this time. Not control. Something closer to disbelief. What do you mean you can't? She said. Across the room, more guests were standing now. Some pretending to stretch. Others not pretending at all. Watching. The quiet elegance of the evening had dissolved into something else. Something exposed. Daniel's voice rose slightly from where he stood. No, I'll transfer it right now, he said. Just send me the amount, whatever it is. Another pause. Longer this time. His shoulders dropped. How long? He asked. I didn't need to hear the answer. I already knew. Nothing about this kind of event moves instantly. Not the venue. Not the catering. Not the staff. They don't restart a system like this in the middle of a collapse. Emily lowered her phone slowly. Her hand, no longer steady. They said it could take hours, she said quietly. Hours. At a wedding. Daniel looked at her. Then around the room. Then at the guests. And for the first time, he saw it. Not the decorations. Not the setup. Not the image they had worked so hard to create. He saw the people. Watching. Whispering. Judging. The illusion was gone. A groomsman approached cautiously. Hey, what's going on? He asked. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. Because there was no version of this story that sounded right out loud. Emily tried to recover. Forced a smile. It's just a small delay, she said louder now. Everything's fine. No one believed her. Not the guests. Not the staff. And not even herself. At the head table, the empty chairs looked different now. Not elegant. Just abandoned. A server quietly began clearing plates that had barely been touched. Another stood still near the bar, waiting for instructions that weren't coming. Everything that once felt coordinated now felt disconnected. Uncertain, Daniel walked back toward me slowly. Not rushing this time. He stopped a few steps away. Didn't sit. Didn't speak right away. When he finally did, his voice was lower. Quieter. "Mom," he said. Just that. No argument. No demand. Just a word, filled with everything he hadn't said before. I looked at him. Calm. And for the first time that night, he didn't look away. I stepped outside, and the sound of the ballroom faded behind me. The doors closed. Softly. Like nothing had happened. But something had. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the quiet. No music. No voices. No pretending. Inside that room, they were trying to fix a wedding. But what they didn't understand was, it was never just a wedding. It was respect. And they had already decided. I didn't deserve it. So I didn't take anything from them. I didn't ruin anything. I simply stopped paying for a place where I wasn't wanted. And the truth is, the moment I did that, everything they built stopped standing. Not because I destroyed it, but because it was never strong enough to stand without me. I looked down at my hand for a second, still steady, still calm. Then I said it. Not to them, not out loud, but to myself. If they could erase me that easily, then they never deserved what I gave them. I walked away, didn't turn back. And here's the part one still think about. If I had stayed quiet, if I had smiled, if I had accepted that seat at table 14, would they have ever told the truth? Or would I have spent the rest of my life sitting in rooms I paid for, pretending I belonged there? Backhand index pointing right, tell me honestly, would you have done the same thing? Or would you have stayed and kept the peace?